Too many vegans have this mindset where the game that. Too many vegans. And we're live. Alright. We are going to read about various movement tactics, starting off with this article from Rethink Priorities. Why it's hard to figure out how to get people to care more about farmed animals. William McAuliffe. I know this guy. Nice guy. Animal advocates are in the curious position of not trying to get people to agree with them that mistreating farmed animals is bad, the vast majority already do, but rather getting people to learn about the actual plight of farmed animals and do something about it. Last year, Lewis Bollard summarised how some of the most thoughtful strategists in the animal movement think we should increase engagement concerning farmed animal issues. The specific ideas run the gamut from befriending influential journalists to avoiding messaging about particularly unpopular ideas. But how do we get from a litany of good ideas to a prioritised ranking? How much agreement can we expect on precisely which messages, messengers, and media the movement should use to increase the salience of farmed animal welfare? To make these questions more concrete, we focused on just one type of audience, US elites. Interesting. We talked to 10 professionals who collectively have expertise about the different types of elites we were interested in: political elites, cultural media elites, business elites, and elites in the philanthropic think tank sector. We asked them to compare 4 dimensions of elites persuasion. Number 1, breadth versus depth. Influencing a lot of elites in a fairly shallow way characterizes the breadth approach, e.g. blanketing a subway station that politicians use to get to work with pro-animal ads, while the depth approach engages a smaller number of elites in a more sustained way, e.g. a summer fellowship program about farmed animal welfare. Number 2, domain relevant versus outsider. Hi Kerry, how you doing? Nice to see you. Thanks for joining. Appreciate you. We're just reading this article about, well, it's called Why It's Hard to Figure Out How to Get People to Care More About Farmed Animals. But I actually didn't realize this when I started reading it, but it's actually focused on US elites in various walks of life. So this is kind of an interesting, subsection of the population, I guess. I suppose the point is that they're very influential, right? And so if you can work out how to influence politicians, journalists, and some others that they mention here, then that's a good thing. So number 2, domain relevant versus outsider. Domain relevant approaches target elites who have some direct relationship with the issue at hand, e.g. getting chefs of prominent local restaurants to endorse an anti-foie gras campaign. The outsider approach targets elites who have no conflict of interest, e.g. recruiting a Hollywood actor as a spokesperson. Read that again. Domain relevant. Okay. Outsider with respect to the actual domain of the campaign. So I guess anyone who's not chefs. High level versus concrete, number 3. The high level approach tends to aim for a change in the predominant ideology among elites, e.g. endowing chairs at universities for scholars who focus on farmed animal welfare. The concrete approach focuses on specific proposals, e.g. cage-free messaging, without a broad discussion of what animals deserve. Okay. So it's like philosophical changes versus tangible policy changes. Hey Jake, nice to see you. Yeah, I think so, Kerry. They interviewed 10 elites. We talked to 10 professionals who collectively have expertise about the different types of elites. Okay, so not necessarily elites themselves, but elite experts. So, yeah, the overall thing is what's the best way to try and influence politicians and journalists and so on, people who have influence, right? Wide versus narrow. Wide approach, try to reach anyone who might be considered elite, e.g. local working groups on animal welfare for rank and file members of a political party. Narrow approaches optimize their messaging for the most elite of elite, e.g. sponsoring an animal advocacy university club at Harvard, but not NYU. Ouch, burn on NYU, guys. Okay, so we've got breadth versus depth, domain relevant versus outsider, high level versus concrete, and wide versus narrow. So this is basically fewer elites versus a bigger section of lesser elites. This is like philosophical versus tangible asks, basically, or changes. This is like people who are involved in the field versus other celebrities, essentially. And then this is, well, this seems kind of similar to this, to be honest. Breadth versus depth. This is doing something that's going to reach a lot of elites to a lesser extent versus doing something that's going to reach fewer people but to a greater extent. So it's kind of a different dimension of a similar thing, right? This is, the narrowness here is a narrower sector of elites with more of a focus on their relative status than like a sustained engagement. But okay, so for each of these, so this is going to be the key, here's the crux of it, right? For each of these dimensions, we ask the same question. If you had $5 million to influence elites to care more about farmed animals, how would you split it between these two approaches? We reasoned that if there was convergence across different interviewees, we could narrow in on the most promising ideas. But as is clear from the figure below, we found little consensus. There were a lot of strong opinions, but they were cancelled out by others who held equally strong but opposite viewpoints. Oh, damn. So I see. The averages that they're reporting in this top row are all sort of moderate, between 40 and 60, basically. But then they're made up of quite a broad range of strong opinions on either side. That's fascinating. The color coding is the sectors that they come from. So this is cultural media in sort of red/orange. Yellow is food business. Green is think tank philanthropic, and then blue is politics/ag politics. Okay. So they all had very different opinions on which of these approaches were going to be more able to influence elites. This might, well, let's see what they say about that. Of course, there is a sense in which we should embrace even high levels of disagreement. When many people have unique perspectives, a wisdom of crowds can emerge, where when many people, oh, pardon me, where their opinion in aggregate is more accurate than any one person's judgment. In this case, the wise view would be that all of these approaches have about equal merit, so we should be doing a bit of everything. Interestingly, no particular interviewee espoused the wise opinion across all dimensions. Interesting. So given this high level of disagreement, they're saying the best approach is to hedge your bets, really, with respect to different strategies. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Jake. Hope she feels better. So, okay, there was a lot of disagreement about what was the best thing to do on these, and to the extent that the main conclusion was diversify. That seems like quite good advice in general, right? I mean, it's good advice for investments. You don't want to put, I won't say all of your eggs in one basket, but you know, you don't want to put all of your chips on one square, we could say, in case that doesn't come in, and then you're going to lose everything, right? Instead, what you want to do is diversify, right? That's always good investment advice, basically, right? Spread your bets. You don't really know what the future holds, right? You don't really know what's going to happen, and therefore the sensible thing is to spread your bets, at least to some extent. I think we are in a similar situation with animal advocacy tactics to a large extent, because, you know, I study this stuff, and the truth is there's a lot of, I think that there are some things that we know with some good degree of confidence. One I spoke about yesterday was the showing animal cruelty images does work, despite what a lot of people say, right? I think there's good evidence that that does work and get people to change their diets and results in more substantial behavioral change from a higher number of people sustained for a longer amount of time compared to other messages that you could use. But even in that case, I think it's worth diversifying the messages you use to some extent, because that's true on average, right? But it won't be true for every individual. There are individuals for whom those animal cruelty images wouldn't be compelling, and some other message is very compelling. So even then, it's worth having some diversification. But there are other topics on which we have a lot less certainty about, you know, which particular media are the best to use, for example. Well, I mean, I think it's documentaries, right? If you could have someone exposed to one thing. But in any case, again, right, the same is going to be true. Different people will engage with different things to different extents. You can't, if it's all documentaries, right, then it's very difficult to have people even get any foot in the door. So, all right, out of these kind of different approaches that they're discussing, there seems to be an argument for doing a bit of all of them, basically. But we're unsure how well the wisdom of crowds applies when we only spoke with a small sample of experts whom we either already knew or had met via warm introductions. Let me read that again. We're unsure how well the wisdom of crowd applies when okay, yeah. So they're saying they've got quite a small sample of people that they basically know, so how much can they rely on this wisdom of the crowds idea that they are saying, right, where the opinion's going to cancel out. I'll just put a link to the article in case anyone wants to have a look, by the way, because at the moment you're getting it with me fumbling through it, but if you want a more smooth reading experience. We attempted to contact many more experts, but our cold emails largely went unanswered. Okay, that's fair enough, right? Of course, with more time to canvass experts and perhaps money to pay them, we could have gotten a larger, more representative sample, but it's not clear to us that such resource-intensive research would be a good use of the animal welfare movement's limited funds. I mean, I do think it's worth paying experts for their opinions in certain cases, but if they're looking to get like a very large sample, you can do that for a general population, but if you're looking to get like a very large sample of experts, then yeah, that's probably going to be expensive, because for, you know, general population taking a survey, you're paying maybe in some cases a little as $1, up to, I normally average like $2.50, I think, for a 10-ish minute survey. But then for experts, you know, depending on the field, you might be looking at, you know, $20, $50, $100, $200, depending on what they're doing. So you probably can't really get too many of them. It's also possible that elites are the wrong targets to begin with. Of course, elites shape broader discourse to some extent, but there are also signs that most non-elites ignore them, especially ones with whom they disagree. Our assumption was that elites can often circumvent public opinion when getting policies passed. Ultimately, directly engaging ordinary voters or certain social groups might be a lot more important. But we suspect that there is very little agreement about this meta-issue, with no clear way to adjudicate who is right and wrong. This is interesting. I mean, depending on how you're defining elites, well, I guess they give a bunch of different elites, right? Political, business, and so on. In that sense, clearly these are people who are making decisions that are more consequential than the decisions that, you know, everyday people make, or like non-politicians, non-elites make, right, as they put here. But I don't think they can circumvent public opinion necessarily. I mean, one thing to keep in mind with this kind of political advocacy is that politicians are ultimately bound by what their voters will or won't vote for. And so, if you're doing something that is incredibly unpopular amongst the population, ultimately, you're going to get voted out next time around, and it shouldn't be possible to sustain very unpopular policies in democracies to the extent that those things are a priority and there's consensus that they're unpopular. But of course, people, we want and we vote for some silly and short-sighted things often, so we're all kind of held to that. Ultimately, tyranny of the majority, right? Ultimately, directly engaging ordinary voters or certain social. Oh, okay, we read this already. Ironically, probably the most useful findings from our investigation were relatively novel, at least to us, tactics that organically came up during the interviews. Interesting. One interviewee suggested starting animal advocacy chapters at non-elite universities that are feeders for federal and state departments of agriculture. That's an interesting idea. Yeah, there's got to be certain universities which are like the pre-USDA universities, right? Will that be University of Wisconsin or something like that? Any Americans in chat? We have a couple of agricultural universities. Royal Agricultural University in the UK, that's the thing. Another suggested borrowing other movements' tactic of hosting themed dinners where animal welfare experts could engage in extended but informal discussions with policy elites invited as special guests. That's a nice idea. Yeah, just like a social setting, basically, where there is cross-pollination between people who care about animal welfare and know a lot about it, and then political elites. There is a lot to be said for that social dimension and those, informal connections. And I think that's honestly the main value in going to scientific conferences. Going to conferences, often the most valuable parts are the conversations in between sessions and even having a beer afterwards with people that you've met and being friendly and more informal and everything like that. It really, developing those relationships would certainly be a good thing in the context of trying to influence policy elites. How much better are these ideas than the litany of tactics Bollard has already considered? We have no idea. But based on our findings, we would just add it to the long list of tactics that it's worth throwing at the wall so we can see what sticks. Database of sources investigating interventions to reduce. Okay, this is the this is like the next article, I guess. Right? Oh, maybe not. This seems weirdly orthogonal to what we were just reading. Okay, I guess this is interventions. All right, we'll read it and see. Who am I to judge? I think the new list of authors halfway down threw me off. We've just released a database of 413 studies examining interventions to reduce meat and animal product consumption. Research on this topic is currently scattered across environmental science, medicine, and animal advocacy literature, making it challenging for researchers and advocates to assess the full evidence base. Our new database aims to help address this gap by providing 413 peer-reviewed and grey literature sources, studies from multiple disciplines in one location, open access availability, pre-registered methodology with transparent reporting. We hope this resource will be useful for those working in sustainability, public health, behaviour change research. We need access to existing evidence on intervention effectiveness. Okay. This was kind of stuck on the end of it, but that's okay. This is a Substack. Cool. Damn, okay, this will be fun to play with one day. This isn't the lime thing, is it? Or is it? This is another similar tool, I guess. Library of interventions for meat elimination. You can run meta-analyses in this platform. Here's this thing. And there's that thing. Cool. All right, well, did we learn something there? I mean, we got, I suppose that the lack of consensus is something. Out of these sets of approaches for elites, different elite experts had opposing opinions, essentially, was the long and the short of it. And there was a couple of cool interventions for novel strategies, setting up animal welfare groups at USDA feeder universities. That's quite cool. Hosting basically informal social events where animal welfare people can mix with policy elites and different types of elites and influence them in those kind of informal settings. Nice. We enjoyed that one. Thank you, William McAuliffe. Rethink Priority Substack. Uh-oh. What happened there? Okay, we're back. All right, let's have a look next at this article on Vox. The animal rights movement was once locked in bitter debate. Now it's getting things done. Bit of hopium, anyone? This is from August 2024, so it's about a year ago. From Vox's Future Perfect series. Let me link this up in the chat. Go ahead and pin that. Nice. Let's read. It's one of those facts of the world that most people know but don't really want to know. Billions of animals on factory farms live their lives in gruesome and torturous conditions so that our eggs and meat are a bit cheaper. Virtually no one really approves of it, but almost everyone participates in it. This is a recurring theme in these pieces, right? There is a high degree of consensus that factory farming is bad. We shouldn't be... Right, here we go. Percent of people agreeing that animal welfare is important in my country. Farm animals and companion animals very, very close together. So just trailing by a few percentage points, the percentage of people who say that farm animal welfare is important compared to companion animal welfare, right? Their own pets. People really do have like very pro-animal attitudes when you ask them about it. So, if you wanted to change that, what should you do about it? When I was in college, activists for animals had some passionate disagreements about which approach to take. A lot of them favoured leafleting, handing out flyers with grotesque pictures of the horrifying conditions on factory farms, with the idea of shocking people into change. Others favoured protests in restaurants and grocery stores, or daring rescues of dying animals from confinement. Some people hoped we could obviate meat altogether with plant-based or lab-grown alternatives, while others wanted to work towards gradual legislative change. I feel like you could do all of these things concurrently. Or not literally concurrently, right? If you're researching sell cultivated meat, you probably don't want to do that at the same time as you're protesting the grocery store. Sounds inefficient. One division was between people who called themselves animal rights activists, working towards a world where we did not treat non-human animals as property, but acknowledged them as individuals, and people who called themselves animal welfare activists, and who tended to favour interventions to make the processes by which we raised and killed animals for food more humane. EAs versus activists. Uh-oh. The growing effective altruism-inspired giving to animal advocacy tended... Effective altruism-inspired giving to animal advocacy tended to come down on the animal welfare side of the spectrum. True. Consider lobbying to make a factory farm slightly more humane, even as it still subjects animals to awful conditions. Many animal rights activists feel like that amounts to complicity in the abuses, and that even supposedly more humane farms would go on to perpetuate. Effective altruists, by contrast, tended to jump at such opportunities. After all, 10% better conditions for animals, while hardly perfect, is still better. Many sanctuaries for rescued farm animals were bitter about effective animal advocates' disinterest in funding them. Yeah, okay, that's true. This is something that Gary obviously talks about, isn't it? Effective animal advocates, in turn, would grimly observe that sanctuaries simply don't have that many animals in them compared to the number in factory farms. It was a matter of numbers. I mean, that is my view, frankly. I do think the sanctuaries thing is tough because to some extent this is like a war of resources, and it's whether we can amass more resources than the meat industry can for trying to influence things in various ways. And it's not that feasible to have sanctuaries full of hungry animals that are quite expensive to maintain, like sapping what are movement resources. Sucks for those animals that are, want to have a nice place on a sanctuary. But it is continue a strain of resources that could be funding Go Vegan ads and, stopping so many more of those animals going into the system. I understand that the intuitive response is to feel something for the individual animal who you do have in front of you and can interact with and is on the sanctuary or whatever. My dog's sitting over there, right? And I would, of course, never be like, okay, I'm going to cast my dog out into the wilderness in order that I can donate the resources that I use to feed him to stop some dog farming. But that's because I'm emotionally involved, right? And if I wasn't, and if I was impartial, and if I was looking at, somebody and some animal that they can either feed and maintain infinitely, or put those considerable resources towards preventing fewer animals coming into the system and suffering, I would be looking at the numbers there, unfortunately. Unfortunately for those would-be sanctuary animals, right? I mean, again, it sucks, but you have to think about this in terms of it's a war of resources. A big thing that we do in Vegan 2.0 is giving to these charities so that the movement has more resources to fight the war. I mean, it's like a white elephant, right? That's literally a term where it's like a gift that, appears to be a good thing, but in fact, it turns out it's quite bloody expensive to keep a white elephant, right? That's why the white elephant sanctuaries are not going to be that feasible in the long term. That's my view. There was also a difference in ethos. Faced with an atrocity, some people are drawn to splash themselves with blood and march down the street, trying to make passers-by realise the magnitude of the horrors they're complicit in. Other people are inclined to whip out some spreadsheets. Based? Well, I wouldn't not do the first thing. Again, I think it's a bit of a false dichotomy, but that's all right. These two groups often end up suspicious of each other, each exasperated to have allies who refuse to do what it takes. Yeah, I mean, probably some of those real, splash themselves with blood people regard me as lazy, perhaps. Probably I am in some ways, right? Compared to people who are willing to get up early and make their placards or whatever. I mean, I don't mean to say that too dismissively, but in fact, I don't mean to say it dismissively at all. I think it's incredibly important that some people are doing those things. Again, I think it is a. I was just saying earlier to my buddy about the RSPCA label debacle. Ultimately, I do think it's a good thing that RSPCA has some sort of welfare certification scheme that are substantially higher than the legal minimum standards. It is also going to be the case that when you do have such a scheme, there will be violations of those standards. That's just always going to happen. And it's also a good thing that there are then animal activists to call them out on that and say, this scheme's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. You need to administer it better or structure it better or something. So I think, those two, what seem to be kind of oppositional forces, are really more leaning on each other and supporting each other in a way, right? It's good that there is this kind of standard, but it's good that there are also activists to go hard at the people administering it when they don't do a good job. And, hopefully that kind of synthesis and, causes progress, right? We'll see. One could write an entire book about the culture clashes as effective altruism-oriented giving entered the animal advocacy space. Effective altruists were also making a splash in other areas like global health and development or biosecurity or AI, but those were all areas where a lot of money was already being spent from many sources. Farmed animal advocacy by contrast was not. Effective animal advocates rapidly became a huge source of spending in the space, and their philosophy of how to do good became prominent. Based. That understandably led to frustration from people with other theories of how to do good, theories they'd often spent decades working on with very little funding. But ultimately, almost everyone involved should agree the effective animal advocacy movement should be evaluated not by how they made humans feel, but by how their work impacted animals. Yeah, that's the tough part, hey, because we do feel how we feel, and that does have to be navigated with more grace than perhaps I tend to lend. No, I'm not American, Jay. I'm British. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, I mean, I have never watched Dominion. I'm not gonna lie. I've never watched Earthlings either. I think I don't need to because I'm vegan. There could still be some benefits of reinforcing my commitment or something like that, but I don't think I need to traumatize myself anytime soon. I'm already doing quite a bit, right? Stronger together. A decade on, the philosophy of incremental and numbers-oriented welfare work has gotten a lot done. One recent blog post published by the Open Philanthropy Project, which has funded effective animal advocacy work, lays out how they did it. The Open Wing Alliance, a coalition of animal advocacy organizations, zeroed in on corporations as a good target for pressure to improve conditions. Hey, that's what we do on Vegan 2.0. We might do a bit of Fast Action Network later. Since these corporations tend to sell eggs to consumers, they care about their reputation. Yeah, indeed. The Open Wing Alliance would effectively offer them a deal. Commit to going cage-free or else. Protesters will mobilize online and on the ground. They'll show up in chicken costumes at corporate headquarters and franchise locations. Public ads and social media shame campaigns will further drive negative press. The Open Wing Alliance will do its best to make the target's brand synonymous with animal cruelty if they refuse to make necessary welfare improvements. This is based as hell. They really go hard on the companies. I mean, you've seen the kind of stuff that we do on on the Fast Action Network. It's really they don't hold back, right? They make the websites with the CEO's name and face on there. They will they make these videos that we go and spam on the social media accounts. I've seen a lot of people doing that on the posts that I've done. I don't know if those are people who have come from my stream, but I'm going to say that they are. So yeah, they really go hard against companies that don't play ball and make cage-free commitments, which has again been decided as a strategic thing, and then they'll go hard against their stakeholders in a strategic and systematic way as well. In an important way, this represents a synthesis of the two threads of the animal advocacy movement that I encountered back when I was a college student. Suit-wearing lobbying types get the meetings with corporations and make demands carefully chosen based on rigorous analysis of which asks do the most for animals. But the corporation's reason to go along is that should they refuse, they will face protesters willing to put their bodies on the line for animals. Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it, right? This is the synthesis of those two approaches. The pragmatists need the idealists, as I said in a video about this. It's proven to be a very powerful tactic. Hundreds of pledges have been made, and broadly they've been kept. Hundreds of millions of chickens live lives that are still pretty horrifying, but still significantly better than they'd otherwise have been. One estimate concluded that compared to a hen raised in a cage, each hen raised cage-free will spend 275 fewer hours in disabling pain and thousands of hours less time in lower levels of pain. Well, that's good. Nobody wants 275 hours of disabling pain. This is like this is some sort of pain scale, of which this is the worst points, right? No one is declaring victory. I think that's such an important thing to say, right? With us lobbying types don't want to actually stop at the welfare improvements. That's just the imminent step. Usually the criticism of that approach is that it's not enough, and that's just not a criticism of that approach because people having that approach agree, largely. No one is declaring victory, but it seems like negotiation and threat of protest strategy is a highly cost-effective way to improve conditions for animals. Yeah, I mean, that's great. It's really cool. This is a great article. It's really cool that the two threads of advocacy, as they put it, have come together in such a mutually supportive way. Exactly as I described, like with the RSPCA and the more grassroots protesters. I think both are needed. It's also kind of nice that the answer to a lot of these squabbles about what is the best approach is that we need a bit of everything. And hey, that was also kind of the message of the last thing that we read as well, right? Where we didn't have any strong consensus on this, and so the best approach is probably to spread your bets and diversify your strategy. And this streamer's diversification for me. I'm a researcher, really. So doing this is me having like somewhat of a long shot on trying to share research in a bit more of a engaging way, and hope that that catches on to some extent. You know, we do all right. If you're here, like the stream. You don't have to watch Dominion Bowl, not Vegan Stew. True, Oppenheimer. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining. The road ahead. Of course, it's impossible to imagine fully addressing the horrors of factory farming with this approach, or with any single approach. Corporations will change their policies if it's relatively inexpensive to do so, but it's hard to imagine them adopting the much more expensive changes that would be necessary to give animals intensively raised on factory farms good lives. And plenty of animal advocates wouldn't be happy even if you did pull that off. They'd like us to stop raising billions of animals in captivity to kill and eat, not just be nicer about doing so. I mean, yeah, I'd put myself in that camp ultimately. I mean, I would be happy if you pulled it off, but I wouldn't be happy to the extent that I would stop. I'd be happy but not satisfied. How about that? And the most unpleasant feature of factory farming is that, unlike nearly all of the world's problems, so far it has gotten worse as the world has gotten richer. Very true. As more and more people enter the global middle class and can afford cheap meat, it creates incentives for more companies to horrendously mistreat animals. For all the progress I've discussed, more animals in the US are factory farmed now than when I was in college. On a problem as big as this one, you can accomplish a ton and still have an unfathomable distance to go. Damn, that's so true. That could be the tagline of Vegan 2.0, honestly. There is just so much that can be done and bettered here that doing a fraction of 1% of all of it is still, well, you know, hours and years of disabling pain, as we've read here. But when I look at the state of animal advocacy in 2024, I'm optimistic. Since a decade ago, there's been a serious maturation of the field. It has integrated the many varying perspectives on what advocates are trying to achieve, and somewhat grown past the frictions of very different people trying to work together toward a common goal. And people have accomplished real and worthy things, and learned a lot about what works. The stakes remain enormous, and the situation remains stomach-churningly terrible, but many of the arguments I remember having in college are ones that the movement has now substantially moved past. Disruptive protests or polished advocacy? Why not one as a strategy to produce the other, like how labor unions do it? Is it worth advocating for incremental change? Looks like yes, it definitely is. Do people from different subcultures and with different perspectives really care about animals despite all the mutual distrust? Looks like yes, they do. At the same time, I've seen many other advocacy groups run aground on such differences. It's worth occasionally taking a step back to be impressed with the achievements of animal advocates, and if you work on any other high-stakes, depressingly entrenched ill in our world, to learn from them. That was a great article. We should read more from this Vox Future Perfect. This is like, you know, accessible journalism about effective altruism themes, and they do a lot about animal advocacy stuff. Well done, Kelsey Piper. I enjoyed this this article a lot. Yeah, the it's funny. I was doing the disagreements as we came through some of this part, and I think I don't know if there are disagreements so much as just differences in approach. All sorts of different approaches can be valid and helpful. And this is just a really cool example of how different approaches can work together and rely on each other. Right, the people who are just going into the lobbying meetings and the, you know, the suit-wearing lobbyist types can't actually do anything without the fake blood and marching down the street types. And the fake blood and marching down the street types, you know, why not go with the lobbying types who are also vegans and pro-animal, who are trying to do things incrementally but are never saying that that's enough or that that's where it ends. Like I said, on these welfare improvements, I'd be happy but not satisfied. I think that's a good attitude to take in the incremental improvement of conditions for animals. And again, I always say this, but a big part of the reason why you want to impose animal welfare standards is increasing the cost of farming animals, not necessarily just improving the welfare standards of the animals which are still farmed, because there are going to be fewer animals farmed overall, right? Hey, boss man, good to see you. Welcome back. Putin cuddling a puppy. Hey, that's us. This is from Brown Research. Yeah, we'll read this Lewis Pollard Substack. Let's do this. How are we doing? How are we doing, chat? You still with me? A lot of reading going on. I really appreciate that you guys are here for the reading of animal advocacy blog posts and articles. Consuming this stuff. There's a ton of this stuff which I always mean to read. And often don't get around to, right? So actually doing it on stream is really nice because it's cool that other people are engaging with this material and it's motivating and fun to do it. Um, so yeah, I'm glad that there's other people who are interested in this stuff. Right, we got a Lewis Bollard blog from 2023. This looks, it's a bit more rugged Lewis back in when this photo was taken. It's more polished Lewis when we saw him on the TED stage. Looks good in both, looks good in both. We love animals. Why do we torture them? Let's zoom in a little bit. People love animals. Cute cat videos rule TikTok and YouTube. The Puppy Bowl clocks up to 420 million social media views, and Disney movies venerate animated creatures. 2/3 of Americans have at least one pet, and 88% of them consider their pets to be family members, whom they lavish 137 billion on annually. More than the economic output of most nations. That's pretty mental, isn't it? I'm thinking my dog's too spoiled. When I read that, I was like, my dog's too spoiled. My dog is the white elephant. He's actually a little black and white elephant. People also hate animal abuse. Hollywood movies proudly proclaim no animals were harmed, while social media platforms all claim to ban content involving cruelty to animals. Ask ChatGPT if animal abuse is wrong, and it drops its standard moral neutrality in favor of an emphatic yes. That's an interesting one. Yeah, I guess abuse is still wrong by definition, maybe. A 2019 Faunalalytics survey found that most Americans agreed that people have an obligation to avoid harming all animals. While a 2015 Gallup survey found that fully a third of Americans believe animals deserve the exact same rights as people to be free from harm and exploitation. I mean, you have to laugh at some of these where people clearly don't understand the implications of what they're agreeing to. Most Americans agree that people have an obligation to avoid harming all animals. These people not know like where meat comes from. Is that what's happening here? I go, oh, I didn't think about those animals. I mean, frankly, this has been the theme of the things that we've read so far, right? Like people generally don't want to hurt animals. We're not in some minority of people who think that it's bad to hurt animals. We just think about it proactively, and most people kind of default meat eaters, don't have a culture that reinforces the vegans are the odd ones out, and so on. And so you can look at society and people's actions and get the impression that people don't care about animals. People must not care about farmed animals, given the way that they're behaving. But it's more like a disconnect than a lack of caring on reflection. Yeah, that's right, Oppenheimer. There's no belly rubs before the slaughterhouses, as far as we can tell. Even the worst politicians and corporations don't dare defend animal cruelty publicly. Vladimir Putin is a self-proclaimed animal lover who made time between invasions of Ukraine to sign an animal cruelty bill into law. Oh, wow. Tyson Foods claims to view the handling of animals as an important moral and ethical obligation, even as its contractors confine billions of them in abysmal conditions. There's Putin with a puppy. Our laws reflect this. Animal cruelty is a crime in most nations and a felony in every US state. In many cases, abusing an animal is punishable by a term of 1 to 10 years in prison, a similar punishment to assaulting a human. As legal scholar Cass Sunstein points out, these laws implicitly acknowledge that animals have rights, legally enforceable protection from harm, even if those rights are seldom enforced. That's kind of surprising, hey? I mean, Are these laws just not enforced, or they don't apply to farmed animals? This seems like it can't be the case, right? Animal cruelty. Abusing an animal is punishable by a term of 1 to 10 years in prison. But clearly, clearly if you call the police and say there's a chicken farm next door, that's not... even if those rights are seldom enforced. Okay, so maybe it is just not enforced. It kind of doesn't seem feasible at that level. There must be exceptions for farm animals, eh? Oh. Pause Andy on reading. These laws typically exempt farmed animals, but popular concern doesn't. In a 2018 Faunalytics survey, 62 to 79% of Americans, Brazilians, Indians, and Russians agreed that animals used for food have approximately the same ability to feel pain and discomfort as humans. Fewer Chinese agreed, but in a 2021 survey, more than 8% said it was somewhat or very important that mammals and birds are well cared for. In a recent survey by Michelle Sinclair and colleagues, over 75% of respondents in 14 diverse nations agreed that the welfare of farm animals is important to them. They all said it's important to Chris Bryant. A similar share to those who said so for companion animals. Okay, so again, yeah, this is the graph we looked at earlier, right, where we've got very similar percentage of people saying that farm animal welfare is important compared to companion animal welfare. We actually have higher in several countries. Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sudan, and Nigeria. A higher percentage of people saying farm animal welfare was important. That's interesting. UK, very similar. Right, we've got, looks like about, what's that going to be, about 80 something percent, 85% maybe. USA, about 80%. And yet we also have factory farms which confine over a dozen animals for every human alive on Earth in conditions so wretched that they have to be exempted from animal cruelty laws. What's going on? How to explain the gulf between our belief that we love animals and the reality that we torture them on an unprecedented scale? Some animals are more equal than others. Popular theories blame our cognitive dissonance about animals on science, the law, popular culture, anthropocentric bias, and linguistics. Science reduces animals' cognitive complexity into arbitrary tests like whether they can recognize themselves in a mirror. Dogs can't, but they can recognize their own scent, which we can't. That's interesting. The law reduces living, feeling, sentient beings to mere property. Popular culture celebrates dogs and cats, but seldom chickens or fish. Anthropocentric bias leads us to favour animals that look like human infants, with rounded faces and big eyes. Oh, I've heard that, yeah. Dogs are increasingly being bred to look like human babies, supposedly. Even our language, full of euphemisms like meat processing and depopulation, obscures the reality of what we're doing to animals. There's something to all this, but I'm not sure it explains why we mistreat animals. Consider mice and rabbits. Science recognizes their complexity, which is why both are model organisms for human neuroscience, including for complex cognitive ailments like depression and anxiety. Animal cruelty laws, which typically cover at least mammals, nominally protect them, even if the laws are seldom enforced. Popular culture celebrates them. There are few more famous animals than Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny. Anthropocentric bias should favor them. Baby mice and rabbits are adorable. See below. Confirmed. And our language hardly hides our use of the term mousetraps and rabbit meat are euphemism-free. Yet we poison, trap, experiment on, and factory farm them by the hundreds of millions. Caption says, baby rabbits are adorable. This one has unusually uncoordinated floppy ears. True. How is it doing that? Another popular theory blames the limits of our moral circle. We love animals inside it, pets and charismatic wildlife, and disdain those outside it, pests and food. Sure enough, a recent study by Bastian Jaeger and Matthew Wilkes found that Americans, Australians, and Brits rated dogs and elephants as deserving much more moral concern than fish and rats. But they also rated cows as highly as members of the opposing political party. Not bad for a bovine. That is, wow, look at that. There's cow, member of the opposing political party. And then the one up from that is owl. These ratings are kind of cooked. There's a good degree of consistency between the three countries, hey? So the highest we've got partner, spouse, then we've got family member, close friend, mentally challenged person, co-worker, homosexual person, charity worker, then dog, then refugee, charming, then soldier, then citizen of your country. Oh, interesting. And somebody from your neighborhood. That's kind of interesting though. Oh, okay, well, these are all sort of somewhat overlapping, right? And then we start to get the animals. Well, apart from dog, we already got in. Elephant, cat, chimpanzee, whale. Member of opposing political party, right down here. And then at the bottom, we've got a spider, worm, ant, wasp, fly, murderer, terrorist, child molester. There you go. That's them's the breaks. There's the rankings. Crazy plot. Yeah, I mean that's quite something, eh? Apathetic human, hidden animal. A simple explanation is that people abuse animals when it's convenient to do so, normally because there's money to be made. Or, in the words of the great Ruth Harrison, a forgotten founder of the modern farm animal movement, if one person is unkind to an animal, it's considered to be cruelty. But where a lot of people are unkind to animals, especially in the name of commerce, the cruelty is condoned, and once large sums of money are at stake, will be defended to the last by otherwise intelligent people. Yet only a fraction of people systematically abuse animals. Factory farms and slaughterhouses employ far less than 1% of the world's population, and the bosses calling the shots are fewer still. So why do the rest of us allow and pay them to abuse animals? I blame ignorance and apathy. Most people have no idea how farmed animals are treated. Factory farms don't welcome visitors. The one that did, Fair Oaks Farm, Dairy Disneyland, turned out to be hiding a few things. Sentience Institute surveys found that most Americans agree that the animal foods I purchase usually come from animals that are treated humanely. That's partly thanks to misleading labeling. Leading brands of factory farm chicken are labeled all natural and humanely raised. It likely also owes to our disbelief that salt-of-the-earth farmers, revered in children's books and trusted by 88% of Americans, would abuse animals. But I suspect we mostly just don't want to know. Unlike other social crises, like climate change or rogue AI, farm animal abuse will never affect us or our children personally. Humans have a millennia-long history of ignoring or belittling moral crises that don't affect them personally. Why stop now? It may not help that the most commonly proposed solutions, eating less meat or going vegan, ask a lot of us. Garrett Broad, who has run focus groups and surveys on our attitudes towards animals, concludes, people adamantly did not want to stop caring for their pets, and they weren't ready to give up meat either. Quite. This is our survey data. This is a Bryant Research survey. We looked at this the other day with between 70% and 96% of the UK public saying that these various animal farming practices are not acceptable. These are all common animal farming practices in the UK. And almost everybody says that they're not acceptable. If only they knew. What to make of all this? It's weird, even infuriating, that most humans consider themselves animal lovers while allowing the greatest abuse of animals in human history to continue unchecked. But it also gives me some hope. Most social movements have to persuade people to agree with them. We don't. Most people already oppose abusing farm animals. In a 2022 survey, Bryant Research found that just 2 to 13% of Brits thought that common factory farming practices were acceptable. In Faunalytics survey, a majority of Americans, Brazilians, Chinese, Indians, and Russians backed a law to require farm animals to be treated more humanely. Our task is to mobilize that support into corporate and legislative change. That's not easy. Ignorance and apathy are powerful opponents, as is the farm lobby. But the industry's apparent power rests on a tenuous foundation. Its practices are so unpopular that its only hope is to hide them behind ag-gag laws and locked doors. That's seldom worked for industries in the past. Just ask Big Tobacco. It also creates an opportunity for advocates. Undercover investigations and corporate campaigns work because the disconnect between factory farm conditions and consumer perceptions is so great. The mere act of opposing those conditions is enough to shock consumers. Advocates sometimes shy away from talking about farm animals, preferring to talk about more human concerns like our health. I think that may be a mistake. People's love of animals and distaste for cruelty is our greatest asset. We should use it. Not signed into Substack. I would have given you a like, but I did like the article. And yeah, reiterating a lot of sources that have been a bit of a theme for the stream today. Lots of people actually already agree with us in principle that animal abuse is bad. We should have, better conditions for farm animals. There should be laws around this kind of thing. And some people really agree. I mean, some people tune into live streams to read articles about this stuff because they really want to know more about how to help animals more effectively. And I appreciate those people. Nice to have 10 of you here. And yeah, we've been reading a few different articles about animal advocacy strategy. A couple from Substack. There's some other good Substacks that we could read. Tobias Linnart's good as well. Oh, this is Lewis Billard's piece about the RSPCA thing that we were discussing. 10 big wins in 2024 for farmed animals. That looks like an end-of-year Hopium post. Should we do that one? Treat ourselves to a bit of Hopium? We'll look at some Faunalytics tactics in practice after this. Thank you again for tuning in, guys. Really appreciate you guys all being here with me, reading up on movement tactics. This is going to be article number 4 of the Lewis Bollard Substack. Make sure to like the stream. I appreciate you guys being here. Hey Esma, nice to see you. Progress for factory farmed animals is far too slow, but it is happening. Practices that once seemed permanent, like battery cages and the killing of male chicks, are now on a slow path to extinction. Animals who were once ignored, like fish and even shrimp, are now finally seeing reforms by the billions. It's easy to gloss over such numbers. So, as you read the wins below, I encourage you to consider each of these animals as an individual. A hen no longer confined to a cage, a chick no longer macerated alive, a fish no longer dying a prolonged death. I also encourage you to reflect on the role you and your fellow advocates and funders played in these wins. I'm inspired by what you've achieved, and I hope you will be too. Alright guys, get ready for some Hopium. This is 10 big wins in 2024 for farmed animals. Number 1, about clucking time. Over 1,000 companies globally have now fulfilled their pledges to go cage-free. Wow, that's an awesome milestone. McDonald's implemented its pledge in the US and Canada 2 years ahead of schedule, sparing 7 million hens from cages. Let's take a minute to do the appreciating the scale here, guys. It's so easy and quick to say 7 million hens, and the actual implications of that for the total amount of suffering occurring in the world is just monumental. I think the population of Greater London is about 8 million. 7 million hens spared from cages. Subway implemented its pledge in Europe, the Middle East, Oceania, and Indonesia. That's interesting. We've been having a go at Subway. I guess they haven't done it in North America. That's the thing, right? That was the that's what we've been doing on the Fast Action Network. We'll do a bit of Fast Action Network afterwards. How about that? Yum Brands, owner of KFC and Pizza Hut, reported that for 25,000 of its restaurants, it is now 90% cage-free. Interesting. These are not cheap changes. One UK retailer, Lidl, recently invested £1 billion just to transition part of its egg supply chain to free range. Wow, that's the second cool thing that we've heard about Lidl recently. They were the same supermarket who reported 700% increase in sales of their plant-based products from 2020. Fair play to Lidl. You've got to give credit where it's due, hey? Number 2, the Exodus. Cracking open cages. In 5 of Europe's 7 biggest egg markets, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and the UK, at least 2/3 of hens are now cage-free. In the US, about 40% of hens are, up from a mere 6% a decade ago. Hey, this is the graph we looked at the other day, or it's a part of that graph, I guess. Oh, it's actually a slightly different graph, but it's the same shape, right? The big increase in cage-free eggs over the past decade. In Brazil, where large-scale cage-free production didn't exist a decade ago, about 15% of hens are now cage-free. And in Japan, where it still barely exists, the nation's largest egg buyer, Kewpie, pledged to help quintuple the nation's cage-free production. These changes matter. The most comprehensive analysis to date by the Welfare Footprint Project suggests that cage-free hens suffer less than half as much as their caged cousins. We'll have to have a look at this Welfare Footprint Project in more detail at some point. I really like that idea of trying to sort of quantify the extent to which different practices cause suffering so that you can prioritize the worst suffering to reduce first. Because when you think about making animal welfare improvement asks, cage-free is one of many different asks that you could feasibly make, right? You could, if you were running such a campaign, you could make it all about ensuring that the chickens have like nutritionally fortified feeds so that they don't lack nutrients that they need. Or you could make it about not doing debeaking so that they don't undergo the painful mutilation. So at some point somebody's looked at all of these different options and said, well, the ones that's going to reduce suffering the most out of all of these things is not literally living your life in a cage. And that seems like it probably would be the one that would reduce suffering most. So that's kind of reassuring that this analysis has been done to some extent, right? And there's the big rise in number of commitments fulfilled for cage-free promises. Number 3, Rumia roosts for 500 million birds. Almost all of the UK's largest retailers, from Tesco to Aldi, pledged to cut crowding for the roughly 350 million chickens in their supply chains. The move, which gives each bird about 20% more space, seems modest, but studies suggest that even this small change can halve rates of footpad lesions, and Sainsbury's reported that the move had already reduced sickness amongst its birds by 29%. Top 4 German retailers, Ruy and Lidl, went further, adopting comprehensive animal welfare reforms, including breed changes that will improve the lives of about 165 million chickens each year. Breed changes is another big welfare ask and issue, because essentially some breeds of chickens will always, because they're designed to grow very fast so that they produce more meat, they will always outgrow their natural strength, and many of them will sort of collapse, and that's why you see these chickens on the floor of factory farms, right? And that's a breed issue, that's not a cage-free issue. So that's another big welfare improvement that would rank highly on that rating. Hey, Vegan Stem, nice to see you. Thanks for joining. retracted message from Amigo. That's curiosity-inducing. Oh, thanks, Kerry. Sorry, I'm just reading all the chat now. Yeah, nice to see you guys. I appreciate you joining. I really do. Give the stream a like if you didn't do that already. We'll try and increase the number of people in here learning about movement tactics. Well, actually, at the moment, we're just toughing some hopium from the big wins in 2024 for farmed animals. Number 4, hatching egg sighting innovations. He loves the puns. I mean, I do as well, to be fair. So, the number of male chicks killed in European hatcheries has fallen by about a fifth in recent years, as in ovo egg sexing has reached 20% market penetration, per new research by Innovate Animal Ag. Wow, that's pretty cool. In ovo sexing has reached 20% market penetration. It's more than I would have guessed. CAT, KAT, I guess, which certifies most laying hens in Germany, implemented its ban on chick killing, sparing 80 million chicks annually from the practice. Wow. Certifies most laying hens in Germany. The first US egg producer announced it will soon stop chick killing, and just last week a US hatchery shared that it has installed the nation's first in ovo sexing system. Wow, that's cool. Europe's ahead of the US on this then. Peas out meat, soy long dairy. Number 5. Yeah, well, that was awful. 11 Dutch supermarkets, which together sell 90% of the nation's groceries, pledged to increase the share of their protein sales that are plant-based from only about 40% today to 60% by 2030. 4 of Germany's largest retailers cut the price of their own brand plant-based meats to match the price of meat. One of them, Lidl, said vegan product sales spiked 30% after it cut prices and placed plant-based meat alongside its meaty counterpart. Nice, okay, so there's still some ambitious targets going on for increasing plant-based sales in, at least in Germany and the Netherlands, hey? And we were reading about recent increases in the UK in Lidl. Number 6, putting green into going green. Governments invested over $200 million into research and infrastructure advancing alternative proteins, including in the US, 71 million, Denmark, 59 million, Japan, 51 million, the UK, 34 million via 2 grants, the EU, 13 million. Look at the UK mogging the EU on this whole metric. That's some Brexit right there. How are we doing more than twice as much as the EU? Step it up, EU, for funding this. And Beijing, 11 million, mogging China as well. New alternative protein research centres funded by the Bezos Earth Fund opened in London, North Carolina, and Singapore. A new top dog for European animals. Number 7. The European Commission announced a new Health and Animal Welfare Commissioner, the first time animal welfare has been elevated to this rank. The new commissioner, Hungarian populist Olivier Várhelyi, promised to deliver on a revision of the EU's farm animal welfare laws, though he refused to commit to a timeline. Last week, 11 European countries called on the Commission to move forward with revision. Number 8, a constitutional clause is a clause for celebration. Mexico's Senate and Chamber of Deputies unanimously approved new clauses enshrining animal welfare in the Constitution, and President Claudia Sheinbaum signed them into law. While the clauses don't mention farmed animals, they empower Mexico's Congress to pass a general animal welfare law, which advocates hope will protect the farmed animals. Number 9, trout standing progress. All right, that's another bad one, this. I'm not going to lie to you. The Aquaculture Stewardship Council, one of the world's largest sustainability certifiers finalized its new farm standard, which will improve the welfare of an estimated 1.2 billion fish once implemented. Let's think about the numbers again real quick, right? Remember Lewis's thing at the start about thinking of each of these individual animals? Again, 1.2 billion, right? It's so easy to gloss over on the page. It's, you know, like 1/8 of the world's population. Each one of them an individual who will suffer substantially less now as a result. This is pure Hofium. The council will start rolling it out next year. Aqualand, the world's largest rainbow trout producer, the largest rainbow trout producer in France, committed to using electrical stunning before slaughter on all of its farms, as did another major aquaculture producer. All of these things are progress, guys. These are not meant to be endpoints. These are not meant to be, you know, is good enough now that we've got them stunning before they're slaughtered. But they are all progress and they are all worth celebrating. Again, that is a real experience that those animals go through. And it's going to be a hell of a lot less horrifying if they're stunned than if they're not, right? No one is saying that it needs to stop there, but you can, you know, take the dubs. Number 10, raising the bar for bottom dwellers. We get a picture of a dog at the end as well, look, because we've been good and done a lot of reading today. Number 10, raising the bar for bottom dwellers. The UK's two largest retailers, Tesco and Sainsbury's, adopted two of the world's first crustacean welfare policies. They pledged to eliminate the creatively barbaric practice of eye stalk ablation and ensure that perhaps the 8 billion shrimp in their supply chains are stunned before slaughter. So perhaps 8 billion, okay. 8 billion. Again, I mean, that is the world's population. They also pledged not to sell live crabs or lobsters in store. Wow, that's Lewis's dog was rescued from a South Korean dog meat farm. I did not know that. That is heavy. Man, that makes it so real, doesn't it? Imagine if this is your dog that you interact with every day and they're rescued from a dog meat farm. Against the giant wrongs of factory farming, these wins may appear small, but for the animals affected, they're a big deal. And they were all achieved by a small group of advocates operating with less funding than Harvard spent renovating a single residential house. Yeah, I saw this. Many of these advocates and funders read this newsletter. So this holiday season, let me tell you how much I appreciate and admire what you do. You could easily have chosen to ignore the plight of factory farmed animals, to dismiss their cause as someone else's problem, and to focus on helping yourself. Most people do. But you didn't. You chose to devote your most precious resources, your time and money, to the cause of a group of individuals ignored by most of society. Individuals who you'll never meet, and who will never thank you or even know your name. Throughout history, small groups of morally courageous people have made the same choice. They've challenged atrocities accepted or ignored by society at large. They've toiled endlessly in obscurity and quiet despair until eventually they've won. I know our cause can feel endless too, but you made the right choice. Thanks to you, many animals will suffer less, and one day we too will win. That's worth being grateful for. Thank you for all you do, and happy holidays. This was a holiday post, which we're reading the following September. But that was pretty good, hey? Look at all the great progress that was made last year for animals. This was a really nice further bit of opium. So thank you, Lewis. There's going to be a lot of good stuff on Substack for us to read. Yeah, there's a lot there for us. All right, let's do a little bit of Fast Action Network, eh? We're back at 'em. We're back at 'em. Action.thehumaneleague.org. there's only a few actions here for us, so we're going to bang these out. And then maybe we'll read some Faunalytics. Action.thehumaneleague.org, guys, I put the link in chat. There's really not that many people taking part in these campaigns, and they are one of the best weapons that we have. So, oh, awesome, Vegan Stem, that's banging. I appreciate you. I'm going to bang some of these out now. Best Western, India, and South Asia. We're going to come up on the ones that we've already commented on quite quickly, I feel. Damn, I really appreciate that, Vegan Stem. I always wonder how much people engage with this part, you know. Can be like a little bit of a chore to go through these, or it doesn't feel, it's, I guess, in some ways not as interesting or engaging as reading and learning some of the material that we've been going over. But this is the work, you know, this is the actual, this is the practice, that's the theory. We don't want to read 5 articles about how it's important to do corporate campaigns and then not do any, right? So, therefore, we're obliged to spam LinkedIn. I won't open my notifications on stream, but I am curious if there's actually any LinkedIn drama cooking. Those of you who stayed for Fast Action Network will be rewarded with live LinkedIn drama. Maybe. No, I guess you won't be actually. Sorry. Right, copy on Best Western MEA's Facebook. That is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I knew that. Best Western. Their social media has been getting a kicking. Come and join in, guys. It's action.thehumaneleague.org. Why isn't it allowing me to comment on this? They can't have blocked me, can they? I can't comment on any of these. They have limited who can comment on this post. Ah, losers. They shut it down. Man, that sucks. Oh, I can comment on their display picture. I'm going to do that instead. Look at that. They've closed down comments on their Facebook page because they were getting inundated by animal activists. That's kind of based, honestly. Oh, look, I can still comment on some of these. Man, we are winning with that. They've actually closed down comments on their posts. Look at that. That is pathetic, isn't it? You make a pledge to source your eggs from hens that aren't living their lives in cages. You promise you're going to do that, then you just don't. And then when people call you out, you block the comments. That is pathetic, isn't it? More like worst Western, am I right? Comment on World Hostels YouTube. It's a YouTube one. A comment on the videos, I guess. Ignore my suggested videos. I do not waste my spare time watching WWE. There's many vicious rumors going around to that effect. Well, these videos really don't have any comments on them at the moment. Maybe they've been deleting them. Even so, you can get over and give them a comment. give them a comment on YouTube. We're on action.thehumaneleague.org right now, guys. We're going to do a few more of these, and then we're going to read some theory. We'll read some theory. We're doing some practice, all right? Action.thehumaneleague.org. We got to let them know. It's another Best Western one coming on American Hotel and Lodging Association's Facebook. What is it? Who are they? Michael Morton, Senior Vice President of Brand Management and Member Services at Best Western, serves as brand representative Best Western within AHLA. I feel like I don't know anything more after I read that sentence somehow. But alright, we're commenting on this is the main thing. Hey, Based, Vale, Zaluga, we've got a few people doing this. Let's give them a hard time. Nice. See all these different angles that we're doing for Best Western. We do a contact form now as well. I'm not doing the phone ones, but you know, I encourage people in the same country to do them, I guess. Fill out form. Right, I'm going to dox myself if I do that with my predicted things. I'm going to do it over here. Yeah, I did dox myself yesterday as well, actually. Need to be careful on this, they're always watching. Your patchy cage-free reporting isn't enough. Face your customers with complete transparent updates. I confirm that I'm 18 years old. Alright. Old. Nice. Alright, look, we completed Fast Action Network again, apart from the phone call ones. We've been smashing it on this platform. We've really do you know what? There's a few other similar platforms. There's one I'm on called Raven from ICOR, International Council for Animal Welfare, I think it is. ICOR Raven. Yeah, here we go. So this is similar. The only reason I don't do this on stream is because it's all through emails, so I don't want to bring up my emails, but this is another good platform for if you're into doing the Humane League Fast Action Network. I get the emails of this. I do the thing sometimes. It's a pretty similar thing, basically, right? They'll say, you know, have like a pre-written email, or it's actually not pre-written. It's like generated by some sort of ChatGPT thing. So that's worth doing as well. I'm sure there's others also. Mercy for Animals used to have one called Hen Heroes. I'm not sure if that's still around. But yeah, nice, good. We did a little bit of Vegan 2.0 activism there. And we've just been reading about how these campaigns are really important and how, in particular, you know, the irate people commenting on Facebook are important to that strategy. So, you know, good for us. All right, let's see if we've got enough gas in the tank to read one of these. Faunalytics reviews. What do you guys think? There's only 3 of us here now. Maybe we don't have enough gas in the tank. We've done a lot of reading today, to be fair. We've done a lot of reading, a lot of activism on, well, we didn't do a lot of activism, we did a decent amount on the Fast Action Network. Maybe we've earned a little video watch, who knows. Or maybe now's a good time to kill it, actually. There's 2 people currently. I think we've had our fill. Yeah, I'll call it there. We'll do some more next time. I'll probably put up some of these readings as videos because people will go and watch them there as well. But thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you being here. And I will see you next time.